Okay, guys, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, welcome back. So, I was saying the founder of Zionism is actually a person called Theodore Herzl. Now, even though they say they're Jewish, but a lot of Zionists they don't actually believe in a God. All they believe is that the Jewish they believe in a Jewish state, which they believe that Palestine should now belong to the Israelis and the Jewish. So, and you will see on social media there are many Jews who oppose Palestine, oppose Israel. They oppose having a state in Israel, and it seems most likely that when when Imam Mahdi appears, this will be the kind of same Jews who will then assist Dajjal in causing chaos in the world. Now, one of the last, well, actually the last Muslim king was Sultan Abdul Hamid II, rahmatullahi alayhi. So in 1897, Sultan Abdul Hamid II was the last Ottoman ruler. He was actually offered millions of pounds of gold just to let Jews migrate to Palestine. But Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah Ta'ala, he kept on his feet and he did not agree, even though at the end they kind of dragged him out of Turkey and he had to he was imposed into self-exile. He refused, saying, I cannot sell even an inch of this land because these lands do not belong to me but to my nation. My nation earned this empire by fighting and bleeding. These lands could be taken from us only by blood. This is a famous quote of Sultan Abdul Hamid rahmatullahi alayh. In the reign of Sultan Abdul Hamid II, the Zionist Jews who were backed by the US, they were backed by Britain, they were trying their utmost to establish themselves in Palestine. Towards the end of Sultan Abdul Hamid rahmatullahi alayhi's reign, there was a lot of political turmoil in the Muslim world. And again, like I said, it was mostly around the Ottoman Empire, which constituted of many countries, including Saudi Arabia. On one side, there was someone who built another movement who he was known as Kamaluddin Ataturk. Kamaluddin Ataturk, what he wanted to do was secularize Turkey. And on the other side, Arab leaders revolted against the Ottoman Empire in the name of Arab nationalism. So there were many challenges for Sultan Abdul Hamid Rahmatullahi. One is that Kamaluddin Ataturk was leading people against the Ottoman Empire. The Arab nations, they were also promised by the UK and the US that if they would help and assist in dismantling the Ottoman Empire, they would then receive their own lands and their own countries, which obviously was a blatant lie, which we'll learn about later on. Kamaluddin Ataturk, he wasn't a very good person. I haven't done much research about his roots, but I don't think he was really a Muslim, to be honest. He banned many things in Turkey, including speaking in Arabic, madrasas. He banned and put restrictions upon the azan in Turkey as well. Later on, a president did win the elections after Kamaluddin Ataturk, and when he reinstated the azan, he was actually hanged. So, Kamaluddin Ataturk, he created a lot of secularism in Turkey, and Muslims actually, started forgetting their roots. By the grace of Allah Ta'ala, now we have President Tayyip Erdogan. May Allah Ta'ala, protect him, who has kind of tried to reinstate as many things as possible. And we could say that Turkey is a better nation than it was before. It's more towards Islam than it was in the past. So how did Palestine become, or is becoming, according to the Jews, as an Israeli nation? Most of it. So Great Britain, they pretended to support the Arab Revolution. So like I said, they promised the Arabs that if you were to support us in dismantling the Ottoman Empire, we would then in return help you to create your own countries. So in 1916, secretly they made plans to carve up the Middle East between themselves and France. This is known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And then at that time, there was the foreign secretary whose name was Balfour. He was a Christian Zionist. He declared that Palestine was going to be the homeland of the Jewish people. And if you look on the right-hand side, a letter was sent to Lord Rothschild about creating a Zionist movement. Again, Lord Rothschild was a Zionist himself. And this was a kind of, you could say, in-state agreement of passing Palestine to the Jews. You know, that's like saying that you have a lollipop in your hand and saying that this lollipop. So Aisha's saying Zaid has a lollipop in his hand, and Aisha says that Zaid, this lollipop is not yours, it's somebody else's. So this, I mean, the lollipop is owned by, it's going to be eaten by somebody else. But I mean, this could sound like a silly example, but my point is that they were given this land without any authority. So then on 25th April 1920, the League of Nations gave Britain authority over Palestine. Again, it's a third party giving access and authority upon Palestine to the Jews when they had no right over Palestine, at all. They basically gave Palestine to the Jews without the permission of Palestinians, which they were not going to give anyway. So during the next 2 decades, over 100,000 Jews entered the country. The British Army's operations during this period were mainly directed against Arab groups opposed to the mass Jewish immigration, because not all Arabs were happy. Some Arabs, they were happy with the fact that they were going to receive their own country, hence they did not oppose Israeli state, but there were a lot of Arabs who actually went against the state of Israel. The League of Nations were a group of countries that contained no Arab nations, and they had nothing to do with Palestine, and they basically claimed that Palestine could be given to the Israelis. So during the Second World War, Jewish armed gangs and terrorist groups, the example Haganah and the Stern Gang, stepped up efforts to drive the British out of Palestine. So you could say at that time they were not really happy with the British to stay in Palestine. On 15th May 1948, the British, they pulled out their troops of Palestine, leaving the Jews and the Arabs to fight a war by themselves. I mean, this war is now being fought till this day, against the Palestinians and the Israelis. And not only that, the USA, they've been funding the Israelis till this day. And you may have, again, read on the news and the social media that Israel has one of the strongest arms defense systems in the whole world. And, there's no comparison. It's very clear that the Jews are the oppressors and the Palestinians have been oppressed. You would see on the social media that the Jews are using tear gas, they're using artillery, they're using armed forces. In comparison, the Palestinians, the only things they actually have are rocks and stones. And despite that, the Palestinians are being called the terrorists. So it's, a few years ago, I mean, not a few years ago, when there was no social media, it was, you could have had a doubt. But nowadays, there's no doubt whatsoever. Through social media, we can see that the Palestinians are being oppressed, and the Israelis are, in actual fact, you could say, the terrorists. In 1948, a catastrophe took place, and it's known as the Nakba. Arab-Israeli War of 1948. The Arab nations were disunited and proved to be no match for the well-funded and well-trained Israel. Like I said, they were supported by the USA. So even though the Israelis, they were probably less in number, The Arab nations, because of being disunited, you could say they lost the war. So by the end of 1948, the Jews had destroyed 478 out of 585 Palestinian villages. They committed 34 massacres of women and children and seized 78% of Palestinian territory. 750,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled from their homes. This is known as the An-Nakba, the catastrophe. Now, if you look at 1917, I just want to show you how much land was kind of occupied throughout the years. So the pre-British mandate of Palestine was, they had more land. They had more land than the Jewish. The Jewish at that time, in 1917, were only in places like Haifa, Jaffa, etc. So on October 31st, 1917, British forces conquered Palestine from the Ottoman Turks, ending 1,400 years of Islamic rule over the region. Before the British mandate in Palestine, Jews made up around 6% of the total population. Only 6% at that time. In 1948, if you look at the picture on the right, the Israelis, they occupied a massive chunk of Palestine. And today, as we see, Palestine at the moment is, you could say, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank in Jerusalem. And even that, they don't have any freedom there. That's been occupied by the Israeli armed forces. So the Zionist military, their forces expelled at least 750,000 Palestinians, captured 78% of historic Palestine. The remaining 22% was divided into the West Bank and the Gaza Strip as we see today. Moshe Dayan, he says, we came here to a country that was populated by Arabs, and we are building here a Jewish state instead of the Arab villages. Jewish villages were established. You even do not know the names of those villages. That's how much, they were kind of wiped out. Israel took over the land in such a manner that the places that were originally Islamic places, Islamic states, etc., they were absolutely demolished. Imam Shafi Rahmatullahi actually was born in Gaza. And I do not blame you, because these villages no longer exist. There is not a single Jewish settlement that was not established in the place of a former Arab village. So that again shows them wiping out the Palestinians. And again, their motive is on purpose, and that is the objective. In 1949, most countries recognized the State of Israel, and it was admitted into the United Nations. Even after the State of Israel was declared, the Zionists committed further massacres and ethnic cleansing. I mean, that's no surprise. I mean, if you look at the BBC News and any other coverage, after a ceasefire took place, 12 hours after a ceasefire took place, the Israelis, again, they stormed Masjid Aqsa. So their whole objective is further massacre and ethnic cleansing. Despite their war crimes, they were still supported by the Americans and European nations. Until today, that is still the case. They basically turn a blind eye to the State of Israel. In 1967, something called the setback, a Aqsa, took place. Between 1948 and 1967, various Arab groups attempted to put up a resistance. And on the right-hand side, you can see which nations, the flags of the nations. So in total, I mean, they had like over 2,000 tanks, 547,000 troops, 957 aircrafts, but they were not united or strong enough to succeed. That was the problem. If these countries were united, they could have defeated Israel. But unfortunately, even though Israel had less tanks, less troops, and less aircrafts, they could not achieve success. In June 1967, everything came to a head, resulting in the Six-Day War. Even though the Arabs were greater in numbers, the Israeli tactics massively defeated the Arabs. And the death toll was over 13,000 Arabs and 779 Israelis. Until today, they have one of the strongest armed forces in the whole of the world. Okay, we're nearly coming to 12:30, and I'm going to stop the session there. I don't think we're going to have time to cover more of the history. We will do inshallah next week, and next week I'll also cover the significance and the virtues of Masjid Aqsa. So we have about a minute left. Does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to type it up. Jazakallah.